park.
Kirsty, welcome to the Power Within You podcast. It's really lovely to have you here with me today. How are
Thank you
you?
for
How are you
having me.
doing?
I'm very good, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, my absolute pleasure. Like, I was, like stalking you on LinkedIn, seeing what you're doing and stuff. It looks amazing, and what you're doing in the neurodiversity. And actually, one thing I was going to ask: there's neurodivergence, and there's also neurodiversity. Like, what is it? What what's the right
Yeah.
term to use?
Yes, so I explain it like the neurodiversity is like the umbrella term.
Right.
So we've all got different ways of thinking, approaching problems, solving problems. But underneath that umbrella are lots of different neurodivergent conditions like ADHD, autism, dyslexia, and so on.
Sure.
And if you have a neurodivergent condition, then yeah, that's about the your brain wiring being fundamentally different.
Okay, so
Yeah,
this is good, and because sometimes it's hard to know the terms and to understand it
yeah,
fully as well, you know. But I think
yeah.
just kind of like having that, it's a really that simple explanation makes complete sense, as well. And it's how your brain is wired, right? As well, like is it something that you are you're born with or you develop depending on circumstances around life?
Um, that one is quite unknown, whether you
Oh,
are completely born with it and or whether it's developed. There are lots of different theories. That for some people, there's a theory that it's a kind of stress and trauma response,
oh,
but others that's very, very controversial. But the main thing to remember is that somebody can have it very young, whether it presents when they're very young or not, depends on them and their environment, their personality, their characteristics, what's going on around them. But if somebody does have a neurodivergent condition, they will always have a neurodivergent condition. It's not something they ever grow out of.
so it's about managing it basically, as well, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So thank you so much for explaining that as well. I know there's a lot of more research to be done in this area, but I think having these conversations really help as well. I think kind of putting what we know already out there. But before we go on to like the amazing work you're doing in this area, I'd love to kind of talk about your own experiences with neurodiversity and being neurodivergent yourself. So
Yeah.
tell me about your own journey and like how I know we spoke about being recently diagnosed with ADHD just in December. So I'd love to hear about your journey about that point of, where you felt like things were feeling a little bit, like different for you and
Mm.
how you came to kind of get that diagnosis as well.
Yes. The core time was on maternity leave. I was about 9 or 10 months in. I started to get some sleep again. Um, and that sleep part is really important because we had a daughter that did not sleep and had lots of
Mm,
complications. And that sleep deprivation is hard for anyone. Being a new mum is very hard for anybody. It's a massive transition, massive life change, lots of hormone changes as well. But for somebody with ADHD, all of those things, especially when they're combined, are core uh, core things that happen that interact with your ADHD and ultimately make the traits worse. So while I was on maternity leave, finally started to get some sleep again, and then the fog was kind of lifting, and I was able to actually see what was going on around me a little bit. And I was watching other people and listening to other people and how they were managing being a new mum, and not the parenting side of things so much, but the day-to-day life, the day-to-day
mm,
tasks, and being at home all day and all the domestic stuff that comes with it when you're not at work. Um, and it just wasn't quite clicking for me that I was seemed to be finding it so much harder than other people,
mm.
particularly internally and the internal dialogue that I had going on. Um, and there were a few moments where I was watching my husband pack my daughter's bag for the next day for me, and yeah, we must have been about 9, 10 months in again at this point, and I watched him do it and realized like he just did it.
Yeah.
There wasn't any thinking behind it. He just did it, and it was done within minutes. And I really remember like clocking and thinking, but that was so complicated in my head. Like I'm 10
Mm,
months in, I've been doing this for 10 months now, but it was so complicated in my head of what I needed to pack, what I needed to remember,
mm,
what snacks I needed, how many nappies, like the backup clothes, everything, um, was so overwhelming that it made it kind
mm.
of impossible to actually get to doing it. Um, and then there were other times where my husband would clean the kitchen, and I noticed, first of all, it was done very quickly and it was absolutely spotless. And I was thinking, I've been trying to do this all day. I feel like I've been cleaning the kitchen all day long. It never looked that clean. There was always stuff left everywhere. I forgot to clean one work surface. And I then returned to work just one day a week. So I was back in neurodiversity land, but mainly focusing on autism. And we went out, my husband and I went out for our anniversary dinner, first dinner out post-COVID, post-baby, everything. So really, big occasion really. Had a few drinks. Hadn't been drinking, so they were taking effect a little bit more than they used to. And I chose that as very impulsively the time to say to him, I think I might be on the spectrum. And he managed it and replied like, on now I can see, in the absolute right way. He didn't just shut me down. He didn't laugh at me. He wasn't like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
He just asked me, why do I think that? And I explained all the same things that I've just explained to you. And I said, even, with like meeting new mums, there's something that always makes me feel like I'm not meant to be there and I'm an outsider, and that it just doesn't quite work. And when I look back on the other, years in my life, I've always felt like that. I've always felt like a bit of an outsider. And he's a primary school teacher, so he understands neurodiversity. And he's like, I don't think that's it. And we were talking through, why it isn't. But this idea had been sparked to me that there's something not right, something is off, and I don't know what it is. So when I returned to work in the January properly, it was a few months in, I think around the April, and I was researching ADHD in females in particular. And I started looking at lots of videos, and there were videos of women who were really successful in their careers. They were really good at school. They did really well. They got great grades. But suddenly after around A-level time, they started to kind of see a deterioration. Things started getting harder for some reason. And describing small things like level of forgetfulness and things like that. And it just absolutely clicked from that point. I knew that's what it was. But even though I'd been working in neurodiversity by that point for 4 years, the main focus was autism. And I just had not seen it for myself at all. And I also realized I completely did not understand ADHD and the female presentation. So things then started to click into place, as I say, of, even with work. When I joined Auticon, it was the first thing I've ever done that was so natural and organic. And I was coaching our autistic technology consultants, and I completely understood what was going with them, and I was really good at it. And then I realized why, because I understood for a reason. And yeah, so it was a few more months, I think, of going in a deep hole of just making sure I got it right. Is this true? And I would go flip-flop. No, definitely can't be me. That's not me. Not at all. No one's ever mentioned this. And yes, then went to the GP. Had a very horrible experience with them, and luckily I work with a great Neuroinclusive company who actually paid for my private diagnosis, which I got on the 23rd of December 2022.
Wow. Yeah. That's the thing, isn't it? It takes these sort of life events, doesn't it, sometimes, to really start understanding. And it's really interesting, like, having a baby as well, and seeing your husband, how he organises around, the little one, and, the kitchen and that sort of stuff. It sounds like we're leading like parallel lives, to be fair. We should do like a husband-wife swap.
I know. It might help him, I think. Give him a bit of support.
But I think that's just that, maybe because you're used to living, it's just you're used to living yourself every day, and like, and you think this is the way it is, this is the way I am, but then you realize, actually, why is it so much easier for someone else to do this and not for me, as well. So and also that working for a company that specializes in neurodiversity as well, like it's, I guess the sort of thinking is there, isn't it, really, about like, oh, maybe there is something there and something I need to explore a bit further. Do you look back at your childhood and see that things were a little bit unusual for you as well, or was it just happened in adulthood?
The main traits definitely started coming out post 16. The ones that, the challenging traits at least. um, or at least that I'd noticed when it come to the diagnosis, my mum had to fill out lots of forms, and we obviously got talking about my
Mm.
ADHD once I realised I had it, and it was quite funny because when I did tell her and I was explaining things, she said, "Well, you're just describing me." Hmm. Yes, I am. um, but then
No,
she
fine. There's
had,
nothing wrong with that. Yeah,
I
that's
know,
such a
and
generation, isn't it? Really? Yeah,
it has been a bit of a, yeah, a drip feed. I think she realizes it
yeah.
now, but won't do anything with it. But she was giving me lots of examples of, like the mornings. She's like, you were always the last one to be ready. I grew up with my younger sister as well. You were always the last one to be ready. You would come downstairs with a pair of socks, and then you'd realize that you've got to brush your hair. So you would run back upstairs, come back downstairs with one sock, and we would have to like turn the upstairs upside down to find this other sock, but we wouldn't find it. You changed your socks, and she said, "Oh, I'd be changing my bed," and somehow it was like under your covers or under your pillow. But that forgetfulness and that short-term memory was showing. Um, I was really good and performed really well at school. It was my hyper focus. I loved to do well at school, and I loved learning. Still, that's a big character strength. Um, but again, now I realise, and from talking to mum, so the feedback the teachers would always give me is, I in essays and stuff, I don't quite get to the point quick enough,
Mm.
and I answer the question in a roundabout way, still well enough to get good grades, but um, I kind of go round the houses and clearly have lots of other things going on in my head before I get to it and can actually answer the question properly. So there were things, but nothing that got in my way
Yes.
as such.
And it's like
Yeah,
teenage stuff, isn't it, as well? Like young adulthood, like, like we're all over the place generally anyway, and like,
yeah,
that sort of stuff. But I think, yeah, you're right. Like, you sort of start noticing it, as you start working or have, a family and that sort of stuff as well. But there are two types of ADHD?
three.
Three types of ADHD.
Yes,
Yes. Tell me more
yeah.
about
So
that.
there's inattentive type, hyperactive type, and combined type. So I
Oh,
have the
okay.
combined type. Yeah.
Okay. And what does that mean, having the combined type as well as both those things?
Um, it means a complete amalgamation of there'll be certain things that I present as being inattentive, not able to focus, not able to pay attention to. Um, it might be quite difficult for me to find things that I'm particularly interested in or appear that I'm interested in sometimes, or or less that it's more if I'm finding something boring, then um, I either have to mask that
Right.
I'm not finding it boring and that I'm enjoying myself, or it will definitely show. Um, and then the hyperactive part of me is, it's less your stereotype that people think of that kind of naughty schoolboy who can't sit still and is constantly fidgeting. My fidgeting is things like just fiddling with something in my hand or touching my fingers. And the biggest part of it is hyperactivity in my thinking.
Right. Right.
I will be, and anyone, particularly females as well, I think, if they've got the hyperactive type of ADHD, they could be thinking of multiple things all at once and at a very great speed. And this
Mm.
week I was describing it a bit like listening to four WhatsApp voice notes on speed two at the same time.
It
And
sounds
you can wake up
horrendous.
in the middle of the night and that's how it is.
Oh
Yeah.
my goodness. Yeah. And it must be so difficult to turn those thoughts off as well, because it's so involuntary,
Yeah.
as well. So it must have been, I mean, obviously it must be such a relief to be able to have got that diagnosis as well. But like, what are like, how is it now? Like, because there's obviously you hear about like tablets for ADHD, about coaching and that sort of stuff as well. Like, how are you managing it for yourself? Like, what are you doing to kind of cope with
Mm.
anything, that you find difficult to like organize, or, hyperactivity, that sort of stuff?
Yeah. When I first found out, I started working with a coach, which was incredibly helpful. Learned a lot about ADHD itself, which really does help, just having the awareness and being able to notice when you're doing things or when things are building up a little bit, whereas before, without the knowledge, you probably wouldn't. Um, a lot of strategies and things to bear in mind as things are going on that might be quite challenging. Um, but then I've stopped working with the coach, and now it's just me. And honestly, this is the biggest part of the process.
Yeah.
I'm not on any medication.
Mm.
Um, for a lot of people with ADHD, and definitely something that I struggle with is self-care and remembering to do things for
Mm.
yourself and look after yourself, fit your own gas mask, especially when you're a parent and you're busy at work and stuff at the same time. Um, and yeah, this is where I'm at right now, of learning how to make sure I prioritize that time, even diarize that time, to make sure I do those things that support me.
Mm.
Um, I know for myself, or now I know that there was a period in 2016 where there was a lot going on in my life, but professionally and personally, I was having panic attacks for the first time ever, a lot of anxiety, and yoga was the only thing that turned everything around.
Mm.
It was one of those things, again, I'd gone to the GP, didn't have a great experience, so walked away thinking I've just got to find something to sort this out myself. So I started yoga like literally every day,
Wow.
and then in true ADHD fashion went to the absolute extreme, quit my job and went to India to become a yoga teacher for a
Mm.
month, which was fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that was my thing. The breathing and the kind of philosophy of yoga is really helpful for me. But now the challenge is just making the time for it.
Making time for it, integrating it into
Yeah,
your life, having that, the
exactly.
balanced diary, right, as well. It's
Yeah.
interesting because, I was speaking to a chap who's based in San Francisco. He wrote a book called The Myth of the ADHD Child. And he has given like strategies around how for parents to cope, or for their children to cope with ADHD without
Mm,
medication, basically, as well. Because
mm,
he really feels like big pharma pushing, obviously, medication, because
yeah.
it's a big industry now as well. But he was basically seeing things opposite. Like he was like, what are the gifts that these amazing young people have, and what superpowers as well? Like I think hyperfocus could
Yeah.
be one of those superpowers, isn't it? Like, so
Yeah.
do you feel like you could use it to your advantage as well, having ADHD?
Absolutely. I think, yeah, I mean, I would not be where I am today in career, husband, daughter, everything without
Mm.
ADHD, not at all. Um, and unfortunately, when things are going wrong or when something happens and you feel like you need to explain what's going on because of ADHD, it it is a, well, ADHD made me do it, kind of scenario of, I'm not a bad
Yeah.
person, I'm not rude, I'm really not rude, but yeah, I sent that email when I probably shouldn't because this was going on. It's trying to help people to understand, and
Mm.
there's an explanation, but it really is the same on the positive side and the strength side as well. So when I can take on so many things all at once, do a variety of different jobs rather than just focusing on one thing. Get work done in a day that a lot of people might need a month to do. Um, all of those things are because of ADHD, and unfortunately, there's not really the space right now to say I can only do this because of my ADHD,
Mm.
and there's not that's not as accepted, and it's not accepted on the other side either of explaining why you do things the way that you do. So yeah, unfortunately, I think we do need more emphasis on those strengths for all of neurodiversity, but ADHD in particular at the moment in the UK especially has got a really bad reputation, and the media has pulled us apart a little bit, and
Mm.
set some biases that unfortunately mean people are judged for the negative side rather than the positives.
It's so true, isn't it, as well? What are
Mm.
some of the biases that are coming out of the press negatively for ADHD at the moment?
It seems that it's the headlines at least are kind of pointing towards ADHD being the latest trend. For things
Mm.
you might find a little bit challenging,
Mm.
that people are just saying, "Oh, it's because I must have ADHD because I've heard about this thing," and
Mm.
I've seen some TikToks and reels and so on. But actually, it's because of social media that people are able to understand it in a way that we don't
Exactly.
understand it, like in school.
Exactly.
It's because so many people have gone unnoticed, particularly females, because it's so
Mm.
much harder to detect.
Mm.
That later in life, a lot of the time for females in particular, because of hormones and hormonal transitions, whether it's becoming a mum or perimenopause and so on, that they're realizing why things have been
Mm.
challenging or why they've been able to do things so well. So the long waiting lists are getting judged, because everyone's apparently deciding that they've got ADHD, whereas actually it's just people are understanding themselves a little bit more.
I think you're absolutely right, and this is something which has always and probably forever existed in the human construction of us. Like it's just that over years we've kind of like understood that the social construct of like work or school has been the same. We learn the same. We
Mm,
like, but we don't learn the same. Everyone's so
no,
different to each other, and I think that it's just that of human beings evolving as well and
exactly.
understand themselves a bit more as well and being
Yeah,
brave enough to kind of talk about how they're feeling and why they're feeling different to others, and then
yeah,
then that will obviously get lots of people thinking about their own selves as well, which I think is a really positive thing. The bad thing
yeah,
obviously is that everything collapses within that, the NHS or waiting lists or
yeah,
whatever it is as well. And obviously, if you're lucky enough to be able to be supported by your work, get that private diagnosis as well. That is amazing. But
mm.
what can people do in the meantime? Like if they are struggling to, see their GP or get on the waiting list, like is there any sort of things they can do in the meantime or any sort of reading they can do or like to just to kind of help themselves?
Yeah. I mean, I do see the value in a lot of in some of the social media stuff because
Mm,
it's understanding there are more people like you, and it's okay, and there's more people than you probably realize that are feeling the same thing. Um, Definitely reading around again, knowledge is power to
yes.
understand what's going on. And I do, and I think if you can afford it, because unfortunately there are barriers, obviously, especially right now with the financial side of things, but a coach or therapist that can, yes, help you understand you, but help you to understand the strengths and the positive sides. Because, for ADHDers as well, and people on the spectrum, and a lot of human beings, the brain is wired to go to the negative and the
Yeah,
challenges and
always.
what's hard because that's what you need to get through. um, but for neurodiversity, a huge thing to be able to manage and cope and to thrive is using those strengths and being okay with those strengths, being okay
Mm,
and grateful and um, kind of proud more so than anything that those strengths are going to be different to somebody else's. um, so if you are somebody that you touched on it with learning differently, um, if you know that there's a different way that you learn and that you pick up things,
mm,
be okay. Find a way. It's easier said than done, I know, but find a way to figure what that is out and do it that way. Own it. Own that that is how you learn because you don't need to be forced into a corner, and that is the tough part of being okay to step outside of the box a little bit to find that power.
absolutely. I love that. And I think you're absolutely right. Knowledge is power as well. And luckily for us, there is, a whole load of knowledge out there. I think it's, like it's being careful about, being too swayed by the media as well. And,
Yeah.
just really just stick and true to yourself and your own awareness of how you are and what's going on with you as well. But I hope, fingers
Mm.
crossed, hopefully things will get better. But I think that takes us nicely into the amazing work that you're also doing at Auticon as well. So you actually got diagnosed after you've been in this
Yeah.
company for a few years and then you were diagnosed. It's amazing. There must be
Yeah.
some sort of attraction to go into that field. Tell me more
Oh, I
about
think,
that.
yeah, I think there's a lot to be said. I think neurodivergent people attract neurodivergent people somehow. Um, so yeah, 2016, as I say, was a really tough year. I was coaching on the side of it and knew that's where I wanted to head so that I knew that something I needed to do was help people. That's where I gravitate towards where I'm my happiest and having an impact. So I started out as a coach at Auticon and then was leading that team of supporting autistic technology professionals, and then helping to set up some of the other businesses that we were building internationally. Um, and I diagnosed I shouldn't do this and I shouldn't even admit to this, but I diagnosed a lot of people once I started working at Auticon, even within my family, of realizing they're neurodivergent and
Yeah.
still didn't see it for myself. Um, and I then what happened? Yes, and then it was about 3 years in, I was noticing that through coaching and working with our clients who were big technology companies, they were banks, huge companies to small companies in the area of tech. And more often they were starting to ask us and particularly the coaches who were working with them every week, how do I do this for myself? I've got a skills gap. How do I hire more neurodivergent people? And what do I need to know to be able to do that well? Or people were coming forward to them, their colleagues, and saying, I think I might be on the spectrum after we deliver training even, or even without that, they suddenly realize they identify as being neurodivergent. They're sharing it with managers or HR, and then they've got no idea what to do, because there's just a huge lack of expertise in that area and experience and knowledge within businesses. So they would come to us, and we would provide support to those people, both manager and the colleagues. But it was from there we was realizing we need to do more. These helping these one person at a time isn't quite enough. We can be bigger than this. So then I chose to have a baby and leave that, and let other people carried on training, at least. And then when I come back in January 2021, I come back to the role of Director of Neurodiversity Inclusion Services. So this is where I set up our full program end to end. What does it look like to be able to support businesses to become neuro-inclusive themselves, or to improve their neuro-inclusion, helping them to know and identify where to even begin for them in particular, what they want their impact to be, where they want it to head, and that might be supporting people directly, but HR, D&I teams, exec teams, as well.
That's amazing. I think it's so needed as well. And I've been thinking about this a lot recently as well, that, I deliver these leadership programs to companies, to big companies like UCL, for example, I'm doing currently. But I'm missing, even though I'm doing a module on EDI, for example, I am missing the neurodiversity part of it. That it's mentioned, but for example, I get quite close to the people I'm delivering to. So, we are together over like a 7-month period, 8-month period, talking and stuff. So then they'll say to me, I've got ADHD, or I'm on the spectrum, whatever it is. And I'm like horrified that I don't know enough to be able to help them. So I'm like delivering the sort of standard stuff of like how to be a leader, and, sort of all the tools to have, and emotional intelligence and that sort of stuff as well.
Yeah.
But I'm really aware that that part of it is missing now as well. And so I think it's really important, things like your services that you're offering, the programs that you're offering, to kind of be included into the business, because I think, there's probably people in the cohort, like say it's 30 people, maybe 3 or 4 are aware that they have neurodiversity or they're neurodivergent, but there's other people that may not realize, but they might start realizing if you start training and understanding what that looks like in the workplace as well, right?
Definitely.
As well, which I think is really interesting.
It's very common, and it's interesting to hear you have the same thing happen to you, and it's not necessarily directly neurodiversity that you're training on sometimes, but it's so common that in our training people come forward, and we use quite a lot of anonymous tools, because we know that's going to happen, and it's very powerful when people do.
Yes.
But obviously there's still stigma, there's still fear of discrimination and so on, so it's uncomfortable, and people are understandably a bit scared of what it would mean, but it's very common once people realize. And I think this is the lesson for any team. You already work with neurodivergent people. So many people come to us and say, I want to hire more autistic people. We've heard about all the cognitive benefits. We're finding it really hard to get talent right now. How can we hire some more autistic people? And one of the first thing I was saying, you already do, but you don't realize it, or they don't realize it, and they're too scared to tell you. And what are you going to do if we help you to set up this amazing neuro-inclusive experience, but then for their recruitment, they come in, and then what? A manager doesn't know how to speak to them very well, or they're scared of saying the wrong thing. They don't know how to put accommodations in place. And you've got all of these other people that are neurodivergent around them thinking, well, where's my support? I've never been offered any support, or, positive interaction based on my own neurodivergence. So it's really important for teams to look after their teams before necessarily being proactive to hire more.
Yeah, I mean, I was, like I said, I was in tech for 20 years. I worked with developers for 20 years as well. And certainly, the majority of them were, autistic on the spectrum as well. But there was nothing in place to kind of support them as well. Yeah. So you're kind of second guessing yourself about how to manage the work, or think about what's best for them and their development. And also, I think what was happening was that, people's careers, there's this thing of like, going through the motions of like, especially in the developer area of like, being a developer, senior developer, architect, team lead, and then manager probably as
Mm,
well. That's kind of the route. But the thing is that I don't think a lot of them wanted to even be in that position of managing people, but to get
mm,
the better money and
yeah,
to kind of progress their career, that was the only way they could do it. And a lot of them struggled with being managers, if that
yeah,
makes sense as well, but didn't get the support of how to manage if they're on the spectrum. Like it was just a whole guessing game,
yeah,
basically, as well. Like it was really difficult, I think,
yeah.
now I
How
look,
did you, what did you do for yourself as a manager to be able to do that and to do it well and to help
so
that
I
person?
basically, I basically got from in my last sort of permanent role, I was not managing anyone to 60 people. And
Okay.
I had to get coaching myself. I'm not neurodiverse, but I had to get coaching and I was burnt out from trying to manage people, as
Wow,
well.
yeah,
So when I look back at it, I'm like, if I found it very difficult to do of not having that
yeah,
managerial experience, like how are people going to be able to cope with this as well? So then I tried my best this is why I've gone down the coaching route. This is why I'm doing the
mm,
MSc in psychology and neuroscience as well to help other people
yeah,
better, because I feel like I missed an opportunity to help and support people like that as well. I could
yeah,
empathize, I could be there, I could really support people through whatever they're going through. And hopefully I was open enough to have a conversation with as well. But I think I was missing tools and techniques to kind of really help someone through their issues and through anything they were kind of, any difficulties they were going through.
yeah. Yeah, I think everything that we do is really focused on management teams for that very
Is it
reason.
really? See, that's interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
they're
yeah.
they're the ones day to day working with their team and with multiple people that are neurodivergent. And they're the ones having an impact day to day on the neurodivergent people as well. So there's two levels of impact, two levels of energy as well, two sets of
Mm,
people that are working together, and it takes two to make that work. So a lot of other companies will focus on coaching and being with the neurodivergent people and helping them to be in the workplace, which is absolutely needed in some cases. But yeah, no, our focus is on managers, as you say, to solve all those problems that you've described. And there was something I saw similar to your story this week of um, talking about the very, very real feeling from managers that of how hard it can be, and
mm,
not knowing and having anything, and the emotional drain that it sometimes has. But I do think it's if there's one piece of advice I always give, and this runs through everything that we do as well, it is enabling managers to have those conversations, to
sure.
ask the right questions. Because again, like I say, there's so much fear of getting it wrong, of offending somebody and not wanting to, of things deteriorating. And it's all about helping people to have those confident conversations and not expect themselves to be an expert. It's impossible. Every neurodivergent person is so different and needs different things.
Yeah,
um,
you're absolutely right.
Managers need the support and they need the infrastructure from HR and D&I teams as well.
How is it? I mean, how are people doing? Because how are companies doing? 'Cause I feel like there's a lot of work to be done still in organization. I feel like
There
you've been
is.
doing this for a long time to get things changed. Are people willing? Like, do you see, is there any resistance though to kind of getting like that training in, or are people more willing to kind of help their staff? Do you feel? It's not like lip
Oh, they
service, like Mental Health Awareness Week lasts a month or a week, for example. So they might put on a couple of things that week, but it's an
yeah.
ongoing process. Like people still have mental health issues a year later, as well. Like,
Yeah.
are people like really diving deep into being able to like do long-term work with their employees?
Yeah, there are some more than others, and it's still not in the masses, and to the level
Mm,
that we want it to be. But it's definitely more than it was 3 or 4 years ago, which is a big improvement. Um, Neurodiversity Week, Celebration Week, Autism Awareness Month, and so on. We see the same thing as to Mental Health Awareness Week of people want to have speakers and they want to put something on, but then that's it. That's the end. As you say, it is lip service. But there are others that come to us and we're working with them really quite strategically with their HR
mm,
teams, their D&I teams, their hiring managers, with the key stakeholders in their business that we need to be on side to make things actually change and stick long term and sustainably. We're working with one business, and we will be working with them for another 3 years. So they understand as well that this does not get solved within 3 months or a 6
Amazing.
months or even a year's
Amazing.
program. This is a
I
commitment
love that.
to doing it ongoing. Auticon have been around for more than 10 years.
Wow.
We're still improving. Like we
Yeah,
still don't have
yeah, of
everything
course.
right. There's still,
The
development
research
of
is new as well,
processes.
isn't it? Like research comes through
Yeah,
constantly as well. Like, I thought
exactly.
it's quite a new field, I think, of and also that the complexity of being on the spectrum as well. It must be
Yeah,
different. It presents differently, I'm sure, with different people.
yeah,
That's even
it
more
does.
complex to solve, isn't it, as well? Or
Yeah,
people
and you
aren't
can't
realizing
see it.
themselves that they're autistic or yeah, like it's yeah,
Yeah, the fact that it's hidden,
that's
that
hidden.
makes it really difficult because even those people that are neurodivergent, sometimes they don't even know how to describe to other people what's going on or what they need. So that makes it even more difficult for managers as well. Um, but I think the fact that it's hidden, it adds to that layer of fear and it does add to that layer of difficulty.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think one of the important things is I've spoken to people and I say we haven't even got gender right. How can we talk about neurodiversity? And fair
Yeah.
point, but you
Yeah.
also have females that are neurodivergent. There is an intersectionality across absolutely every D&I agenda that you're trying to
Absolutely.
achieve and that you're working on, and it shouldn't be a silo. Don't create a team of autistic people that sit in a corner. It
Yeah.
needs to be a fully inclusive culture.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. It's
Mm,
so true. Intersectionality is key, I think, to like involve everyone, as well in that process. Because when you think of the
mm.
developer, you think of a male developer, male
Yeah,
coder, right, as well.
yeah.
Whereas, there are lots of female developers as well and female coders and but also yeah, it's that masking as well. Like I'm sure, it does present differently as well. Like you said with ADHD, like
Mm,
the female presentation of ADHD is quite different sometimes as well. And
yeah.
I think some more research just needs to be done on that for sure.
Yeah, and as I said before, that knowledge is power is the same thing for managers. If you just think about masking, what does that mean? And
Mm,
just understanding, you don't need to think about it every day, but understanding that, particularly for your female developers who are in a man's world ultimately and sitting
mm,
around lots of men, there's a lot of things that they're coping with and dealing with every day because of their intersectionality, because of their neurodivergence, because of their mental health, and sometimes that it can affect decision making or their
yeah,
level of overwhelm, their level of stress. And it's not necessarily you need to have all the answers, but having the compassion that something more is probably going on for some of those people.
absolutely.
It can help to make sense of some things. Yeah.
What kind of impacts or what kind of positive impacts are you seeing with your work at Auticon currently? Can you give us any sort of examples of how things are positively progressing?
Yeah, I think we are seeing more people realize that they need to review everything that they do. You
Mm,
realizing that policies and practices and so on, they're not fit for purpose for supporting somebody that's neurodivergent, but also supporting their managers as well. Um, there is a growing number of people that they are starting to add neurodiversity into some of their employee surveys and so on. And this is
right.
really powerful because the data doesn't lie. So for them seeing for
Yeah.
themselves that, we actually do have like 15% of our workforce is neurodivergent. We're not doing anything about it. We don't know about them. We don't know what to do, how to support them. Um, that's becoming a bit of a driver for people coming to us to kind of face face the roses or smell the roses, whatever the saying is, of realizing we need to do something about this. Um, so yeah, things are definitely changing from an individual level, but also from a big organizational level. We our niche is we do speak to the kind of much larger international companies because we are global. So we do projects that are UK based, US based, to try and create some consistency at the same time. And that is very encouraging as well to know that and to see that it's not just the UK, things are shifting in other countries as well.
Indeed, indeed. And I think
Mm.
there's like you said, like you have to start somewhere as well, don't you? And Autocon's only 10 years old, so I'm sure there's a whole load of like work to be done. But like it's just kind of starting that process and really getting into
Mm.
those, making that impact and helping
Yeah.
people who are neurodivergent to kind of like really, be able to feel comfortable in their own skin at work and also
Mm.
have managers and leaders that really accept them and are able to
Yeah.
kind of help them develop in the right way possible. Like when I was speaking to to Thomas previously in another episode, we talked about, it's identifying the gift that someone has first rather than seeing that they're
Yes.
neurodivergent. So what gifts
Yeah.
do they have, which can then, help them, choose a career, for example, as they get older. But I think that's the same with adults as well.
Yeah.
Like, how can you take your career progression in a different way? Because we're multidimensional. Like, why should we do something for 20 years? Like, our parents' generation is a bit different, but like now there's like multiple talents, multiple ways that you can really, enhance your life and find your purpose with as well, I think,
Definitely.
and I think
And
being neurodiverse is a beautiful thing.
That goes both ways of understanding that for both, obviously, the individual that has their life to live and spends the majority of their time at work, but at the same time, the business benefits of that, rather than pigeonholing somebody or forcing somebody into a corner of progression, like to be a manager so they can get more money. You are not going to get the best out of that person, and they're going to leave. The costs of that and the loss that you have for that skilled person leaving when there could have been another route or another option for them is huge. Again, both to individual and business. And the thing with neurodiversity as well is the cognitive differences that we have quite spiky profiles. Our peaks and troughs, our challenges and strengths, they're in extremes, kind of up and down.
Sure.
And the more so that somebody is working to their strengths, doing what brings them joy, doing what they're interested in, the more that, for ADHD, they won't have as much of a challenge with their focus and their attention, because they're doing what they enjoy, and therefore they're able to find flow. They're able to actually do the job that brings them the success on both sides as well. But that, unfortunately, isn't a natural management style for many people. That's where you come in to teach that side of things.
It is exactly it. It's so true, isn't it? Like, it's I feel like, honestly, after speaking to you, like, I feel inspired, but also like I feel like I just want to develop more so I can help more, if that makes sense, well. Like, it's incredible the work you're doing, and thank you so much for sharing your story as well. Like, how can people get in touch with you to like kind of understand, or like if they do the work in the companies, they want to talk to you about ADHD, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Personally, I'm always happy to hear from people personally. That's the big enjoyment part of my job, of hearing what's going on for somebody and being a little bit nosy. So LinkedIn is always a good one. A couple of weeks ago, I actually set up my own Instagram page for particularly about ADHD and motherhood. It's completely failing because I never take any photos, so it doesn't really work. But the idea being of helping people to understand, that female presentation and the motherhood side a little bit more, for work and outside of it. But no, when it comes to Auticon, LinkedIn or Kirsty.Cook@auticon.com.
Perfect. That sounds amazing. Please do get in touch if people are listening, especially if you need some support in your companies to kind of get help with your neurodivergent staff. So I think this is a really key and really necessary and really helpful, along with additional programs that you're doing already as well. I think it's the budget thing, isn't it? People need to put their budget onto
they do.
Amazing initiatives. Definitely.
That's the hard one.
Yeah, it is a hard one. But Kirsty, thank you so much for being on Power Within Your podcast. I've really enjoyed my conversation with you today. It's been wonderful.
Me too. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.